Hey folks, good day to you. I would like to talk with you today about something that I mentioned at the beginning of an assignment recently about an encouragement towards feedback and what I'm calling disagreement. I want to elaborate on that a little bit today for two reasons. One is I think it'll just give you a window into me and my practice and something I'm looking at in the context of the class. And also because this just feels really important to me. As I do what I do, what I'm about to tell you feels important to me for my own success in the role that I am choosing to adopt, and also for the success of the Sangha and the practice that I'm attempting to facilitate. So it has to do with the need for someone in a leadership role within a spiritual community, from my point of view, to be accountable and to be open to feedback and disagreement from the people that he or she is helping to facilitate in practice. So this comes to me from a few places. Originally it came from, this is actually years ago, while I was still at the monastery, and actually years before I left the monastery. My teacher gave me the assignment to become a student of Buddhist scandals that had happened through time, of which, unfortunately, there have been a great many. And I did that. And I did a bunch of research on different teachers and the scandal that had occurred and what had occurred within the scandal, and whatever people who were there at the during the events as they unfolded would say about the causes. And particularly I was interested in, and my teacher was interested in me being interested in, the structures that were in those communities that caused, or at least allowed, those scandals to happen. Of course, the reason that my teacher wanted me to look into these things was because she wanted me to be prepared and wanted me to not have that happen to me, to not fall into the disgrace that a great number of people have fallen into as they have attempted to lead practice in various contexts. She wanted that not to happen to me, and of course I want that very much not to happen to me too. And so I was really eager to understand about how that happens and how that goes about. And I've been looking at it ever since. And I left the monastery, I think it's been about 5.5 years ago now, maybe a little more even. And I hesitated for a couple of years before I decided that I would take on a role as a facilitator for other people's practice, for that very thing. Because I wanted to feel confident in myself that I have the integrity that's required to lead a practice in a way that avoids scandal, and also that represents practice through my own practice and my own behavior, represents what really is possible in practice. So I hesitated for a couple of years, and I got to a place where I felt like I could trust myself to do that. And of course, anything could happen. I mean, it's always a possibility that there are things going on in my mind that I can't see that would drive me to do things that then I would later regret. But as far as I can tell, I feel like I have a clean relationship with what I'm trying to do, and I'm really interested in maintaining that. So in terms of the place I'm coming from, at least for now, I feel clear and clean. In terms of the structures, though, that's a whole different thing, because structures have to be set up within a community like this to make sure that it works. So within the class, we have some structures around communicating with other people, and different things that I don't need to go over those now, different things that we've talked about, to make sure that the structure of the class is safe and that people can feel safe to share and be vulnerable in the class, because that's what the class needs in order to be successful and in order to be a powerful experience for people. In the same way, the practice in general needs structures so that there is integrity within it, and so it just doesn't go off the rails. And so it's the structural part of it that I want to talk about now. The more recent thing that has sort of brought this into my awareness, two things really. One is a few weeks ago there was a major scandal on the part of a Buddhist teacher. I don't need to tell you who it is, but who I had been hearing about quite a bit, and who was said to be kind of the real thing. This is somebody who really is in integrity. And that teacher's former students wrote an open letter about what had happened within the community, that then destroyed the community. And the community dissolved within a few days of, I think, it's my understanding of that letter coming out. I read the letter, and it was very helpful in seeing what happens, how people get into a hard place and get confused and end up allowing structures to persist that put them in a place where they're very susceptible to becoming confused and succumbing to the thing everybody succumbs to. And the even more recent thing that's happened is my participation in the class, because I am in something you might say of an authoritative role in the class. I don't particularly want to be an authority in the class, but it's sort of inevitable within my role that I'll be seen that way. And so, and you may not all see me that way, and that's fine. I kind of hope you don't, actually. But people will project onto the leader all kinds of things that aren't there. They'll project a level of enlightenment and clarity onto teachers. That happens all the time. That's not there, and that's a part of the dynamic that causes the whole problem. So I'll likely say more about that in a moment. But anyway, so as I've been participating in the class, that's been really on my mind, and it's been on my mind for the sake of the class. I mean, we're not running into any problems in the class that I'm aware of, but for the sake of the class, but even more for the larger Sangha, I want to be really looking into how to set things up so that I have the most support possible to stay in integrity. I feel like I'm in integrity now. You can see if you feel that way or not. But to stay in integrity as best I can, and to not lose myself and get confused in a way that would do damage to the Dharma, in a way that would be, infinitely regrettable. Okay, so now to get onto some particulars. So when I've looked at the scandals that have happened, and this is the case in this most recent one I just described, and also several others that I ran across since I left the monastery, including, interestingly, the first Buddhist teacher that I ever paid attention to, who was a Tibetan fellow who fell into a just hideous scandal a few years ago. So what is common, there's a number of things that are common in that, but the central thing that I've noticed that is in common with all of these scenarios where teachers have become misguided and have succumbed to confusion, we might say, is that in each case, each of these people has put themselves in a position to be beyond accountability and beyond feedback. And that is a dangerous thing to do, especially within a spiritual context, because as I kind of implied earlier, it's not just the teacher's fault, when these things happen. The students are enabling that, and from what I've seen and in my experience too. The students come and, people, I was talking with somebody about this just yesterday actually, about how, people come to practice and, they've been disappointed largely by the authorities in their lives, beginning with their parents, and then with others who have failed to love them unconditionally and have failed to be perfect, to say it bluntly. And they've been disappointed, and they're looking for someone who is perfect and who perfectly represents something good, an unconditional love and a possibility for transcendence. And, of course, it's natural for people to want that. It's completely unrealistic. I mean, that doesn't happen, except, it depends on how you see that. The Buddha, perhaps other people who have come since the Buddha, who have attained some sort of supreme enlightenment. That is not what's happening for me, I'll tell you. Like I like to say, and I say this regularly, I'm just a human being like every other human being who is walking a path of awakening and is somewhere in the middle and dealing with issues and and has conditioning that he's carrying, that he's working through just like everybody else. Anyway, there are people who claim to have achieved some high degree of enlightenment, and who knows, maybe they have. I tend to be suspicious when that occurs, but you never know. I don't really know. That might be something that is actually happening. At any rate, so the students typically cooperate with the teacher in creating this situation where the teacher can become deluded. And what tends to happen is the teacher starts to assume that they're right about everything, it appears. And maybe even assumes that they are enlightened, and they cease to question themselves. And that is a very dangerous position for a person to be in, because, someone who is ceasing to question themselves has opened a door to conditioned mind. And that door, it's a back door that the person can't see. And conditioned mind, it will very eagerly, I can guarantee you, come through that door and start doing what it does, which is to create confusion and delusion in a way the person is not aware of, and will then ultimately talk the person into doing things that destroy what they are all about and destroy what they are attempting to accomplish in the world, and the opportunities and the possibilities for the beautiful things that manifest from heart-centered awareness to come to be. I think that's what happens to people. And so structurally, it's set up that the teacher is immune to feedback, to guidance from other people who are in a position to offer guidance, and also in a lot of cases for disagreement. That the teacher will not allow feedback and will not allow disagreement, and will insist that everyone just assume that they're right. A tricky thing about this is, in Buddhism, of course, is an Eastern tradition, and within the Eastern tradition, this is a part of it. And in the East, culturally, I mean, I've never experienced it personally because I've never been there, but my understanding is culturally, there is it's more sort of normal and acceptable and even prescribed for there to be a hierarchy and for people to sort of set up authorities and then follow those authorities. It's not so much the case here, although we do that unconsciously in other ways, for sure. I mean, we're doing that all the time. But in overt, big cultural ways, we tend to resist that because not we all, but many people in the West value independence and autonomy a lot more than being a part of something. So in these Eastern traditions, and in Buddhism particularly, it is traditional for the teacher to have unlimited authority, and for the students essentially to give over their own will to the authority of the teacher. That's the way it was at the monastery where I trained, and so I know from my experience that there is something that is really helpful about that. There really is, and I think that's the way it has been set up. What's helpful about that is the student will of necessity is required to give up all of their better ideas, all of their opinions, and to give up really their conditioned mind, you might say, and everything that goes with it, to this larger thing. So at the monastery where I trained, I often said, and I heard other people say that, well, the way this works is the monastery is sort of a smaller version of life with a capital L. And we're being in relationship to life, or to the monastery in the same way we want to be in relationship to life. And so we want to give up our self-centered will to the monastery in the same way that we want to give our self-centered will to life as a whole. And so at the monastery, we had no say in anything about what happened. We ate what was put in front of us to eat. We did what we were told to do. And the guidance of the teacher was the guidance, and we were expected to follow it. And it was something super helpful about that, because it directly benefited me, because I really had to look into my attachment to my own ideas, my own perspectives, and my own desires in order to give up my will to that larger authority. There's a problem with that, though, and the problem comes if the teacher is not clear and takes on a belief in themselves, or has a place that's unconscious in themselves, where they're not looking at their own process. Because you think about it, a teacher who is at the head of a system like that has to be clear for the whole thing to work. If that teacher becomes confused in themselves and is not aware they're confused and is not interested in looking to see if they are confused or not and if they're clear or not, then the whole thing loses its integrity. And everything that happens within the structure underneath that person will be contaminated by conditioned mind. So that's the danger. So for me and what I'm doing, I think if I was in a monastic context and I was working with people who were monks, there probably would be an element that I would impose, a structure that would be kind of like that. Although I can't imagine that I'd ever go so far as to the point that I would make myself immune and unresponsive to feedback. I just think that's dangerous, and it's the temptation is just too great to succumb to, all of the desires that are there in conditioned mind and do something really foolish. I probably would, though, make it a lot harder to do that than I want to make it within the context that I'm creating now. in the context that I'm creating now, where there is a Sangha, that is practicing in the world, and that I have a relationship with, from my point of view, more as a consultant and a facilitator than as a teacher. That's how I see it. I mean, I am teaching things. I mean, I can't ignore that fact. I am teaching what I know from my experience, but I am not actively taking on a role where I am above other people and sort of forcing people to follow a guidance that I prescribe in the way that a traditional Buddhist teacher would. I'm not, at this point anyway, I'm not interested in that, and I doubt I ever will be. So within this context that I'm setting up now, I would like there to be structures and an understanding that it's okay to follow those structures so that there is accountability for me and that I can have the support that I need in order to stay clear within myself and to be the best facilitator and the best role model within this practice that I can possibly be. So here's what that looks like in terms of the class and in terms of the larger Sangha. I am open to feedback. I am more than open to feedback. I am eager to have feedback if people have feedback to offer me. And that could be on any level. It could be on a level of, when you said that thing the other day, that just didn't sit right with me. I had this queasy feeling about it in terms of where you were coming from. I questioned where you were coming from in that. If somebody has that experience and has the guts to say that to me, which I hope you will, I hope you know that if you say something like that to me, I will not hold that against you. I will not attempt to punish you or shame you or humiliate you in any way. I will not attempt to use the authority that I carry in my role as a leader within the organization to do any unkindness to you, to the best of my ability. I mean, it's always possible I could fail in that in some way. And if I do, give me feedback. Tell me that you feel like I'm failing in that. At any rate, to the best of my ability, I will not do any of those things. So if somebody were to have that experience and were to say that to me, I would feel most grateful. Even if I looked at it, which I would do, I mean, that would be my commitment in relationship to the feedback, is to take any feedback that comes in and look at it sincerely, honestly, and deeply for myself to see what I can see about that. In the same way that I expect anything that I offer to other people to be taken. If I offer a perspective, I don't tell people what to do, but if I offer a perspective or something for people to look at, I expect people to really look at that and to sincerely see what's so about that for them and to implement anything that they feel is useful in that and to let go of anything they feel is not. I feel like that's the arrangement we have in this community. And I want to do the same thing. I will do the same thing in relationship to any feedback that comes my way. So it could be that kind of feedback, or it could be people. This is a lot easier, but people a lot of times will say recently I put up a new website with some new language in it, and I got some feedback about that. That was really helpful. People said, "Are you sure you want to say that? Does that really make sense?" Stuff like that. That is really helpful. So that's one form it can take. The other form it can take is what I've been calling disagreement. That word doesn't really fit. It's just a short way of saying it that can go in like the title of this video, but I'm not really talking about disagreement in the sense of, I disagree with you, because that's not really very helpful. I mean, it was interesting. I was thinking just this morning about, it was a little while ago, a number of weeks ago, I said in a group to someone, I disagree with what you're saying. And afterwards I just felt uneasy about that. I was like, that's not correct. It's not that I disagree. Like, disagreement requires an I to disagree. And that's not what this is all about. And that's not where I want to be coming from. And that's also not where I want the people I'm interacting with to be coming from. It's more about posing a question, questioning something for more exploration. So that could be along the lines of, when you said that didn't make sense to me. Could we look at that? Like, how do you see that? Here's how I see that. How do you see that? That kind of thing. And any variation thereof. And to me, I welcome that. I actually enjoy that. And people, for some reason, I think it's because they are projecting things onto me that aren't there. But for some reason, people feel a lot of hesitancy sometimes to express what we might call disagreement in the way, or to question what I've said. But I welcome it, and I enjoy it. And the reason I enjoy it is because it leads to better conversation. It leads to deeper exploration. And often it requires me to look more deeply into what I've said and the way I look at things. I'm a student of awareness practice just like you are, and just like everybody is who's involved in this Sangha. And as a student of awareness practice, I want to see things as deeply as I possibly can. And there are inherent limitations currently, and this is always the case, in the way that I see things. And so if there is some way that I can be assisted in seeing things more deeply, I want to have that assistance. And that is what I hope, you, as the people who are involved in this community, I hope you'll have that same attitude of mind. That you're open to other points of view, and you're willing to take another point of view and look and use it as a mirror to look into, like, how am I seeing things and how am I looking at things, and is there a deeper, clear way of seeing those things? So I welcome it. And yeah. So practically speaking, let me see, is there anything else I want to say about that? I don't think so. I think I said it. So practically speaking, in terms of the class, I would welcome you to offer feedback and to question what I say either in a public or a private way. If you feel uncomfortable doing it in a public way, send me a private note. That's fine by me. If you feel like it's something that is just hot, that might cause a reaction in me or others, then maybe a private way to do that. But I welcome it to happen in public. Actually, I think that's best. We don't want to be hiding things in this practice. And so, if you question something, create a new post. That's the best thing logistically, and say, hey, David, when you said this, I didn't get it. That didn't make sense to me. Here's what I see. What do you see? Or to offer feedback in some way. Put it publicly, and that way other people can chime in. One of the things that I am attempting to repair, I feel like in this, is the environment in the monastery where I trained, where that was not allowed. We were not allowed to compare notes. And the idea in that was that there was a consensus reality that would get created that would, and that people would basically get into the conditioning and then join together in resistance of the practice and then take over the practice. And there's something to that. I think that kind of thing can happen. It does happen. I'm just, at this point in where I am, I just trust you way more than that. It's not been my experience that there have been difficulties. People have been following the guidelines of the practice, as far as I'm aware, quite beautifully and very willingly. And I trust people to not do that and to really be looking in themselves. And if I find out that trust is not justified, then we'll have to do something else. But at this point, that's where I am. In terms of the larger Sangha, I'm going to actually send this video out to the larger Sangha, not just to the class. If you're someone who's not participating in the class and you would like to offer feedback, do it. It's difficult to find a public way of doing that in a larger Sangha, but if you send it to me privately, unless it feels like it's not going to be helpful for some reason, I'll post it publicly. I'll just post it in a blog and put my response. And then, if we're having a dialogue, I'll continue to post a dialogue in there in some form. I'd have to figure out how to do that logistically, but that won't be too difficult. Okay, one more note about this, and this is kind of the other side of it, and it relates to what I just said about creating a consensus reality. It's just the form of that happens within an individual person. When I talk about offering feedback, and when I talk about questioning and being willing to disagree, what I'm not talking about is going into conditioned mind and being in a place of resistance and acting out of a place of resistance kind of no matter what is happening. That is not helpful. And I don't want to be doing that, and I don't want other people to be doing that. That's not helpful for anyone in the community. And so if that's what's happening instead, so in other words, if a person is disagreeing and giving input, not because they're attempting to take responsibility for the community and in a way that's the best for all, so that we can all have the best environment to practice in as possible and the best facilitator of the practice as possible. But instead, if a person is just creating trouble basically because They want to be in a place of resistance. They're triggered. They're in conditioned mind, and they want to be acting out of that. That's not helpful. And I will, it's part of my job to put up a mirror in front of that when that's going on, and I will. So, if that is happening, then, in a way that I hope will be, very kind and clear and open and compassionate, I will put a mirror up in front of that and point out what I feel like is going on. So that's a part of it too. So I just offer that. It's not my experience that that happens, hardly ever. I'm just not experiencing people being in resistance towards me like that, and towards the practice that I'm advocating towards that, and then just trying to run with it. The resistance that I see is more in the form of, sabotaging their opportunity to practice. Ducking out of things that they could participate in, selling themselves short in that way. Just checking out and not participating. I don't very often see a more active, sort of belligerent form of resistance, but it can happen. So just to pay attention if you're somebody who kind of falls on that side of the spectrum. Okay, thank you. That's what I have to say on the topic. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate you, all of you, so much. Those of you who are in the class, those of you who are showing up for the virtual groups, those of you who are reading the blogs and stuff that I send out, thank you so much for your willingness, for your practice, and for being the people who you are. Take care, be well, have a beautiful day.